and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod. Alan Quinlan in studio and Matt Williams, as ever, from afar. Let's get straight into it. A first test defeat in the autumn for Ireland. A disappointing night at the Aviva. Alan, straight to you. Nothing just really clicked at all for Ireland.
No, they didn't build any sustained pressure, which we're used to them doing in the last few years when they've won big games and been very consistent. Uncharacteristic mistakes, 21 handling errors, turnovers, and again, just not really getting into multi-phase. And look, some of that's down to probably a little bit of rust, but also down to New Zealand being very sharp, aggressive, and in some ways, you know, I think, and this might sound strange, I think other teams at this level would have crumbled, possibly with that pressure at times that New Zealand put on. Probably 20 minutes into the game, they had a period of 10-15 minutes there of a lot of sustained pressure. We saw some brilliant scramble tackles from Van der Fleer, Gibson Park. So we were lucky in a sense not to concede in that period. I think they put so much pressure on, and then they were very controlled. McKenzie was superb at out half, and I think he controlled them very well. And so the way Ireland started the game, I thought they were up for it. They were physical, they were aggressive at the breakdown, and they looked like they had that blast of energy that you need. But ultimately, I think they were just very, very sloppy in what they did. And like I said, you know, some of that's down to New Zealand, but some of it, Ireland would be very frustrated when they would have looked back at the game. It was always going to be a tight game. You know, we all fancied Ireland to maybe get the job done because of it being at home.
Apart from me, obviously.
Apart from you, okay. Yeah. I do remember you saying that. But, you know, I was pretty, maybe I'm a glass half full man most of the time when I do predictions. But I thought this was going to be very tight, and there were certain things had to happen for Ireland, and some of those things went the other way, actually. You know, one of their big strengths is their continuity and be able to hold on to the ball. They weren't able to do that. They turned it over. They forced passes. I think in some ways they were trying to rush things and force it a little bit. They probably should have kicked a little bit more. New Zealand won the territorial battle. They were playing in the right areas a lot. And then, of course, they're forcing those penalties. Some of them were a bit dubious, but it's much too high a penalty count to expect to win a game. So that kind of sums it up a little bit, and I think it would have made a frustrating watch from my point of view. Being a forward, I think, you know, the 3 lost lineouts, the one at the end with Rob Herring is just kind of, it just sums up the match, doesn't it? But one lost lineout is one too many for me, and I thought again we're naive, we're a little bit narrow. There's no spacings there, and it was a frustrating one, but credit to New Zealand. I think Ireland were a little bit off it. And we'll know this week, when we talk about Argentina, where we're at. Is there a bit of a turn here in this team? A little bit of negativity this week. And they do deserve some criticism because, you know, there is no divine right to turn up, even if you're at home, and expect this result to happen. I think it would have frustrated them. I mean that in a way that players would have been here. We weren't all at it. We weren't all on it. And, you know, when you play against a team like New Zealand, who have been in transition, and I suspect and would suggest that transition is heading on a very much an upward trend. Okay, they look for consistency. They lost games this year. They lost against Argentina. They lost against 2 against South Africa in South Africa. But bar the Argentinian one, they could have won both those tests in South Africa, and they're a dangerous side. So harsh lesson for Ireland, and again, we'll talk about it later. There's pressure for this week.
Matt, Alan touched on it there earlier. 13 penalties conceded, 31 missed tackles, 21 handling errors. They're stats and statistics we haven't had for years for this Ireland team. Were you surprised how poor they were, if that is fair to say, or actually the All Blacks were pretty good to you?
Firstly, Stu, it's going to come out back to front because of the cameras, but I wrote down 2 minutes here. I don't know if you can see it. See 2 minutes?
We can see it, yeah, on the other side, yep.
Yeah, that's what I said it would take before you reminded us that you picked New Zealand. So I was wrong. It took 1 minute, so I was out.
Matt, I'm a humble guy. You know me, but I just had to get it in. Is that fair enough?
He just hedged. He hedged his bets.
Quinny and I are going to also. After your suggestion, I did change before we did the TV show. I did get out of it.
Yeah, and you reminded me of that, so that's fair enough.
Get it in pretty quick. But I've got to say, you even surprised me how quick you got that in, mate.
He teed me up.
You couldn't resist.
Couldn't resist.
Mate, I was. I mean, our summation is great. I think there was. I got a stat here, which I think is an incredible one. Ireland gave away 13 penalties. Now, when they won in Chicago, they gave away 4. So that is huge. If you dig a bit deeper, 10 of those penalties, 10 of the penalties that Ireland gave away were in their own half. And Mackenzie kicked 7 out of 7 from the ones they had a shot at goal. Some they kicked a touch. And his conversion. So, that's a lot of points coming from his boot and those penalties. So that alone, and when you go even dig down deeper into those breakdown penalties in particular, now there were a couple of others for offside, but if we look at the breakdown ones, Ireland had a definite policy of rolling away slowly or trying to slow the New Zealand ball down. Now that's not new, that happens every game, but they were really clumsy penalties. Ryan gave one away, Finley Bealham gave one away, and then there was Henderson's one where he just simply didn't release the ball, which was really bad because that was right in front 3 points. So that statistic tells you Ireland were not at the races. And as Quinny said, they've had copped some criticism, and they should, because they're only 1-3 now. So they lost to England, lost to South Africa in the last game of the Six Nations, lost to South Africa the first test, and now they've lost. Obviously won the second test and played brilliantly, but now they've lost to New Zealand. And they've not lost to New Zealand twice in a row now. Quarterfinal, RWC 2023, and this one. So you're starting to get a shift in numbers that is not what anyone wants to see, but it's also what we can't ignore. And there were reasons for that. I thought their strategic kicking game was really poor. Now, they obviously had a plan. When you look at the kicking maps, so for everyone at home, a kicking map is literally just someone writes down on a piece of paper where all the kicks were and what they were doing. And there were lots of short kicks. They were trying to chip or get just over the line and not give the ball to Jordan at fullback and let them counterattack. There were a lot of short kicks, and Mac Hansen, if you remember, almost got one. Problem is they didn't get any. They were almost on a few but didn't get any. And so there's statistically, so if you combine that, they didn't play territory on a wet night, which turned out to be a disaster. And then they gave away, their real discipline at the breakdown, gave away 10 penalties in their own half. So those two failed tactics combined meant it's almost impossible to beat a very good team like New Zealand when you're doing those sort of things. 3 line-out losses. Paul O'Connell's line-outs has gone from 100% and the best in the world a couple of years ago to around that 70-ish % mark, 75, dropping down to high 60s. That's a worry as well. Scrum was rock solid apart from that one error from Finley Bealham when he came back on.
And that was the wrong call, Matt. It should have been an Ireland penalty.
I thought it was too. You know what didn't help us on that one was Tyg Byrne broke off and came forward and pushed on the scrum. If he had stayed just bound on the scrum, I don't think it would have drawn the attention of the touchy. So there was I agree with you on that, but I think Tyg, if he should have stayed bound. The other one is our bench made no impact. So when Tom O'Toole came on and got injured, okay, we can't blame Tom for that. But when that other group came on, when Henderson, Piramani and Herring came on, after that, Ireland didn't score a point. So that statistic alone probably leads us, to this week why we saw a couple of changes on that bench, in particular Ryan Baird coming in for Henderson, then the selection that's come up this week. I know we'll get to that later. So all of those things combined, taken individually, 2, 3, 4%, combined that just made a really, really hard night against a very good side impossible.
Alan, Andy Farrell's just named his team there an hour or so ago. Henshaw in for Aki. We spoke about how unlucky Henshaw was last week of being left out, but that midfield's so competitive. Tom Clarkson can make his debut from the bench. Prendergast as well, what a story that's going to be. And then Casey gets a nod ahead of Murray, and Ryan Baird comes in for Henderson. So Matt's talked about the impact that didn't happen off the bench this week. He's going to need it on Friday night from his team, and he's rung the changes there. And what about Henshaw coming in? Aki hasn't been dropped for Ireland in a long time, but it wasn't one of his better games.
The second test in Durban, had he a knock?
It was down as a knock, wasn't it?
Did he not train during the week? He did do the warm-up in that second test, so he was out running about there. So I suspect that they looked at that impact at Robbie Henshaw. He was superb in that second test. And look, they're great players. It doesn't mean Bundy Aki. Like, listen, last year at the World Cup,
that's what I was going to say. One of the best.
Up to that point, and like he is a top class player, world class,
and still is.
Yeah. But look, again, some of these players they're different individuals and need more minutes. Some guys, I always remember Sean O'Brien, Keane Healy coming back from long-term injuries. They could nearly pop straight into a starting team and have a big impact. They were power players. They were, Bundy making lots of carries last week, but they were waiting for him. New Zealand, they bunched up tight there, and he didn't have the impact that he can do. But like all his teammates, he didn't have a bad game, but he just didn't have that impact that we know he can produce. He's still a wonderful player, but I think that's the depth of the centre partnership. Like I was even saying last week, it's a big call to leave Henshaw out of the 23 and put Jamie Osborne in there. It's backing, a young player who has a big future ahead of him with Ireland. So yeah, it's just freshening it up really, and I think Robbie Henshaw will be chomping at the bit. He hasn't a lot of rugby play this year, but he's a superb player as well, and he's a British and Irish line. So is Bundy Aki. So we've been blessed with two brilliant centres, inside centres for a long time. The other changes, you referenced the bench. Again, when you're in a 23 like this and you lose a match, it's easy point fingers and kind of go the impact of bench, this, and look, it's relevant, and it's not that it's not factual, but I think the impact off the bench was similar to the impacts to some of the starters. If you get what I mean, not that they had bad games, but
everyone was below par.
Well,
that's what you're saying out of the 23.
Yeah, exactly. So the bench is supposed to come up, and there's probably a little bit more pressure, particularly when you're chasing a little bit. Jack Crowley comes off when Ireland are leading. That penalty that Matt referenced, which was a really significant one on 62 minutes. Ireland are 13-12 up. They get a scrum. Finlay Bealham is back on the field. He scrummaged perfectly in that scrum. I've watched it back numerous times. Tuinga Fasa, he swings his hips out, he collapses. Ireland get the push forward. Nick Berry's given him a penalty. Andrea Piardi calls it from his side. Totally wrong call. And I guarantee you, Andrew Piardi would be told that was the wrong call. And Ireland would have sent in that one. There's a couple of other clips on the other penalties. But look, it was just one of those days that things were going wrong for him. But the impact off the bench there's a couple of changes there. Ryan Baird is someone who we know is a really impactful player. Craig Casey he's bringing a different sort of zip to your game. And I said it last week with Conor Murray, who's been an incredible player and still is a really, really top class player. But he's not as quick as he was, and he doesn't move as quick, and he's great experience. And the bench last week was picked to see out the game, not to chase the game. I don't know if Matt agrees, because if you can bring Henderson on, Murray, O'Mahony, and you're 8 points up, well, they're perfect to bring them on, aren't they? Because they just have that control, that experience. Murray's box kicking, distance kicking, all that kind of stuff helps. So, yeah, that part didn't work out. Again, writing off players here after one game. New Zealand lost the game against Argentina. They were absolutely
lambasted, brutal
in the game. Argentina attacked and scored brilliant tries and beat them. New Zealand responded a week after, and what happened? They put 40-something points on Argentina. I'm not saying we're going to do that, but it happens to teams. The only kind of negative here is our age profile is high. If you have a younger age profile and you lose a match like this, people kind of go, well, we'll learn from it. There's a lot of experience there. But there was factors at play. Like I said, New Zealand were sharp. And, you know, one thing that we forget, well, maybe we don't forget it, but I think this Irish team, they showed incredible character last week to hang on at times when they were under a lot of pressure, when things weren't going well, because the other teams would have buckled. We saw, you know, England did it. It's that tenacity and that resilience that you need. But New Zealand could have scored another 3 or 4 tries against England last week. They could have scored tries last week against Ireland, but they showed a lot of character to hang in there. And you know, when, as Matt made a perfect point, when you're giving away kickable penalties, and Mackenzie's strike rate has gone very, very high now. He was very erratic kicker before. He wasn't a normal kicker. He was a backup kicker. You know, his improvement has been brilliant. You know, they're chipping away at the scoreboard, and that period from 62, that changes it. We started really well in the second half. Van der Fleer scores, but there was too many moments where we knocked the ball on, we forced a pass, and we couldn't build any sustainable pressure. So they finished the game stronger because of that match sharpness, but also because their legs weren't tested. They weren't hanging on for dear life for any long sustained period. And if you actually look at the game, even though the territory was in their favour, in New Zealand's favour, it wasn't in the Ireland's 22. They weren't in Ireland's 22 hammering the line. It was probably from that halfway to 22 metre period that they spent a lot of time there. So that's where Ireland were kind of hanging on at times and under a lot of pressure in those kind of moments. But they weren't battering Ireland in the second half, and you know, they go and score a brilliant try like we know they're capable of with Will Jordan. That seals the game. So air went out of the stadium. The atmosphere wasn't great anyway. But so let's see if they got character, that character that I mentioned there to fight. Mac Hansen spoke about it during the week, and you know, they've got to try and find collective improvement right across the board. And look, you have to, in a sense, I agree with the fact of his selection here that by and large, you've got to keep it the same or close to being the same, because you need another crack at it. If I was a player there, I'm in a different mindset. We know the opponent is very, very dangerous, and they're capable of beating Argentina this week. So the determination is to fix the wrongs of last week and the mistakes and the errors. And it was error strewn and surprising. Post-contact metres, 317 for New Zealand. So that shows that they were actually, you know, making it really difficult. And Ireland, defended so manfully, even though they're missing 30 tackles in the game. But their scramble was incredible. So if a defender got past somebody, there was always a player there who tidied it up. You know, Ireland's ball carries 86 to 118. It's normally Ireland have the ball so much, like their passing game. You know, their passes were 124. I've seen Ireland hit 180, 190 passes in a game. So it shows that they didn't have that opportunity. And, you know, we don't have the individual strike runners who can just give them a ball and run the length of the field and stuff. So, yeah, they were all off a little bit, but and New Zealand were sharp, really sharp. So they got the momentum from the week before. But there's certain things, you know, the line-out, couple of line-outs lost there. No gap in the line-out. Frustrating things that I've seen, and that needs to be fixed.
Matt, talk to me about the Irish 10s. Jack Crowley gets another opportunity. Frawley's hooked. Sam Prendergast, the up-and-coming class act, hopefully, or he definitely is, but he needs a chance, or going to get his chance this weekend. You sort of spoke off air that you think in Portugal, the training camp, Andy Farrell would have set the 3 10s down and said you're all going to play at some part. Do you firmly believe that's the case, or has last weekend sort of scuppered his plans and he's maybe gone something different and said, you know what, Frawley had his 20 minutes, didn't take it, so now it's Sam's chance?
Stu, unless we're get Andy Farrell to confirm it, we won't know. But as soon as I saw Prendergast was selected in the squad, I thought he'll come off the bench for some game. I thought it might have been Fiji, but as I said to you, I would not be surprised if Frawley gets a start against Fiji. And this is the same. I would use the same thing with Ryan Baird. These are fantastic young players. Ryan Baird probably in front of both Frawley and Prendergast. But you've got to give him time. Now, if we'll switch it on the head, if Andy Farrell picks these guys and doesn't give them time, how do you get these players to improve, to experience, to be ready if there's an injury? What happens if we go into a week where Jack's got the flu or he's sick or he's got a head knock and he can't play? Prendergast's got to step up. The November window is the time where you give guys opportunity and allow them to learn moving through it. It's interesting. Al and I have had this chat before. Before we went to professionalism, we played A games. We had tours, so you played Monday, Wednesday, and your Wednesday team was basically your A team, and that's how guys got experience at international level and learning to be in these different environments. When we first went professional, they almost cut it out. Ireland had an A team. That's where Al and I first met. I was coaching Ireland A, and Al was coming through and playing in it, and then they dropped them all, and now they're coming back. Now they're taking an Ireland 15 or developing Ireland to South Africa. New Zealand played Munster. Australia played 2 games. They played Bristol and so on in their developing teams to give these guys opportunity. Then when you're good enough, you say, well, when we get a test at home there's no shields on it, in other words, this isn't a trophy, there's not the Six Nations, we'll try and give some of these young guys a go. And I think that's a great selection. And I don't know because I haven't spoken to Andy Farrell about it, but I think Kieran will get a chance to start a game, and it may very well be that Jack's on the bench for the Fiji game. And I think that's a great thing for the development of both those players as they move through. So I've got no problems with it.
So, Matt, how much do you think the stock of Frawley has fallen from last week?
Mate, he didn't have a good game, but neither did Jack. I don't think either of the 10s.
Do you think in the long run these guys could learn more from that last weekend?
Yeah, and that's it, mate. They're still learning. They're still learning their trade. It's not like Henderson coming out and making that error. Now, Hendo's a leader. He's a lion. He should know better. I am certain that Jack and Kieran will sit down and watch that game and talk about their tactical kicking game and their plan on a wet night. And it didn't work. Why it didn't work? And no young player should be dropped on one performance, or no, the older player should be dropped on one performance. That team has earned our loyalty and earned the loyalty of Andy Farrell, and that's why there's so many guys there. But I am certain in the plan for November that changes to that bench were penciled in. Now, I don't think Thomas Clarkson was penciled in. Obviously, that's an injury to O'Toole, but he was brought through, and that's a good thing. That's going to be a great thing for this young man in his future and development, especially as a prop. And he's going to have his arm around Rob Herring and Kean Healy on the other side. How good is that? Andrew Porter there, guys to learn from. He's going to sit on the bench and he's going to have Ty Furlong there talking to him and mentoring him all week. That's how we learn as players. You learn from the people around you. So I don't see any of that as a panic. I don't see any of it as you're a naughty boy, you play bad, you're out. I don't even see it for Bundy. I even think that they might have said to Bundy, listen, you're going to get rested one of these games and we're going to bring Robbie through. I think that's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it would be a really bad thing if we didn't play Robbie Henshaw through these games to get him back into that level because of his injury and his age profile. He just needs a couple of tests, and so does Bundy. We're going to need him in the Six Nations. We proved that last year. So I don't see any of those changes as A, panic button, B, a dropping, or even C, we're not happy with you. I think this is part of giving players opportunity through these November internationals. And when we come to the Argentinian side, I think we can say the same thing, that Felipe, from the side Felipe Conopami picked against Italy to the side he's picking now, he's trying to move people around and give them opportunities. And then they have France next week and we'll see a different group again. Well, not too much of a different group because I think this is close to his best side, barring injuries he's putting out for the Aviva. And I do also think this is the game that Felipe, knowing Dublin and Ireland so well, wants to win more than any other game. So I think we can see that through the selection of all the coaches coming around, including Australia and including the other home nations where they're looking at it. Probably a little bit more desperation from the Welsh and the English now. Aren't I happy about that? But we're seeing that development coming through in those selections.
Alan, we're now into the society of one game at a time and all that, and, you know, the panic button sometimes come in, obviously not after one match and defeat, but you said earlier, you know, this team should be rightly criticised when they were at their best. Everyone praised them. They weren't.
Yeah,
last weekend, so they get criticised. But what I'm saying is, with the result of last Friday night, now this game has even more pressure and relevance to it.
It does. And
so if Ireland will probably bounce back, but if they don't, and yes, you can't really answer that, but I'm going to ask you it anyway.
The criticism...
Where should the criticism stand then?
The criticism has to be, you have to try and find where the problems were and what the circumstances were. I always think you don't get personal with players, obviously, but if you're frustrated as a pundit or ex-player or someone working in the media, there must be relevance to what you're saying. So, in other words, if the players don't try last Friday night and they're walking around the field and they're falling off tackles and they're sloppy, that's extra criticism. That's the stuff that infuriates me. And I'm not saying I was perfect when I played, far from it. But
that didn't happen.
You have players here who are putting their bodies in their line. Like I said, incredible work rate. They're busting a gut to get around the field. They're so aggressive and so physical. You know, those big New Zealand runners coming at them, you know, they're putting in countless tackles, impact tackles.
Agree, but 21 handling errors.
Correct. So that's what I'm saying. The criticism has to be balanced. It's not that they're sloppy. I think it's a collective thing. And I've been out in the field. Matt has probably coached teams where just sometimes when one or two mistakes happen and another couple creep in, you're nearly expecting the next one to be a mistake. You're going, even when Kieran Frawley's gone up at the end for the high kick in the touchline, I was like, oh my God. He could drop this. And
he'd catch that 99 out of 100.
Absolutely. He'd catch it with one hand and probably give a 20-yard pass in field, and Ireland are back in the attack. So, you know, balls scooting out of rucks. You know, the pass from Frawley to Henderson on his shoulder. Hendy's maybe overrunning it a little bit. The pass is too hard. So there was lots of moments. Bundyaki in the first half, he's seen a gap and he's forgot that he's overran the ball. So there was a couple of them that were definitely sloppy, and that's down to a bit of rust. So I don't think the players themselves thought they were just going to turn up on Friday night and beat New Zealand, because you don't do that. You know, go back to what Etzebeth said about wishing, you know, see you in the final at the World Cup. There's no Irish player meant that. You know, they're not switched off here going into this game on Friday night thinking we're at home, we've a good record against New Zealand. I think they were more pumped up and probably too tight and in themselves, and then they tried to force things a little bit. It was a tight game. You think it had started that second half, exactly the response you want from Ireland, but they just couldn't get any sort of control. And like I said about the bench, the bench gets a bit of a rap maybe for lack of impact, but we kind of, bar the first 15 minutes when I saw real aggression and energy, we lacked that kind of zip throughout the whole game. So maybe it's down to the first game. Andy Farrell, in fairness, is pretty honest, and he wasn't looking for that excuse because he said they trained really well. We have seen them turn up before and play quite well in the first game. 2 years ago against South Africa, wasn't perfect, but they scored 2 tries in that game. They beat the world champions at the time. It was 1916, but they were, you know, I think Etzebeth scored a try late on, but they were fairly comfortable in that game. It was a good performance first up. So, yeah, it's just probably an off night for them. We'll know more, as I said, on Friday night. There is added pressure, to answer your question. New Zealand or Argentina, very dangerous side, because you've seen winning in New Zealand. They play without a fear, and I think Felipe has even come out saying that he doesn't want to restrict this team from having a go from anywhere. They scored some incredible tries in that rugby championship, and they'll really fancy this one. And it's in very simple terms. If Argentina beat Ireland on Friday night, that's a massive scalp for them. You know, they're in party mode Friday night after that game if they win. and they're well capable of it. So I do suspect that Ireland will be better, and they'll tidy up some of the issues like we saw from Test 1 and Test 2 in South Africa. But, even with experienced players in there, it's a learning curve again that, you just have to make sure you do the basics well. And I think Ireland tried to overcomplicate things a little bit. They probably should have been a bit more pragmatic and maybe kicked it for a little bit more territory and did what New Zealand did to them. New Zealand snuffed Ireland out of it, and then they were able to kind of change gears, and one moment like that at the end, they scored that try, it's game over. And that's what we see Ireland have done the last few years a lot. But they need to be better, because if they like, this is a must win game, in a sense that if you win the first game against New Zealand, and Matt has alluded to it, if you win the first game against New Zealand, well, the pressure's off then. Even if you lost another 2 games and you made a raft of changes, you're in development kind of acceptance, if you like, from the public. But now it's about, if you lose the game against Argentina, we're in crisis mode, which is a bit over the top, let's be honest about it. I know some of these players won't make Rugby World Cup 2027, but there's a lot of rugby to be played before then, and we must not forget the national team funds the game throughout Ireland here. 6 Nations, money that you get from winning tournaments. It's important that continues, and that's why a lot of the time, I suppose, the game is driven by winning matches here, and doing well in tournaments, i.e. the 6 Nations. It generates all the funds, really, a lot of them anyway. But yeah, they're in that pressure cooker now on Friday night. I think they can handle it. This is about leadership now. Mac Hansen, I like the fact that he was quite chippy about the way he was talking during the week, saying, people don't realise what's going on inside here in the group. We back ourselves, and we know we can do better, and I expect a response, he said, and we expect to respond this week. So it's not going to guarantee him a result, because this is going to be a very tricky game for them, but I think they'll be better.
Matt, where are you on this Argentinian team? Beating New Zealand, South Africa, France and Australia, but also lost to them. Is this the best Argentinian team you've seen in years? But yet inconsistency or consistency is the thing they still lack. And as much as we all think they'll chuck the ball about, which they will, they brought in Matera, hardy old boy, as their captain, straight into the back row.
Yeah. It's the best edition of the Pumas I've seen since those really competitive teams back when Al was playing the turn of the century, 99, 2003 World Cup.
Jesus, you're putting me well back there, Matt.
They've reached a few semi-finals after that, Matt. 2015.
I was hoping you were going to say 07 at the World Cup when they got to semi-final and Felipe was playing and all.
He's not 93, Matt.
Yeah. Anyway, look, I'll take it on the chin.
You're a ball boy.
I was in Lille. Was it Lille for the game?
No,
Lons, yeah, for that game where Argentina they knocked Ireland out of the World Cup. I got called into that World Cup squad, but anyway, I was okay. So I have to. Yeah, you're right, Mac. Back in '99, when I was hovering around an Irish squad, okay, that's all right.
And I don't want to bring up Adelaide Oval against Adelaide on a certain try that you scored.
Well, I don't mind anyone. I don't mind anyone bringing up 0-3 when I saved Irish rugby scoring that try. Anyway,
the ego will be out of the room. On. Come on, carry on.
Carry on.
No. And there's another nice story there that Al knows is true. That the Irish supporters in Adelaide drank about 20 pubs dry, and then they went across to they played Australia in Melbourne, and I was at that game, and we went out afterwards to the pub down the road for a beer. Couldn't get a beer. Went to the next one, no beer. They drank out all the pubs there, all through Melbourne as well, and they lost against Australia that day. Just as they played, it was one of the best Island Australian tests I've ever seen that night. It was a fabulous night. We're going back, but this team, this Argentinian side, they're getting up with those sides. I actually think. And sure, I'll put this in one way. The height that this particular Argentinian team has achieved already is higher than those really wonderful Argentinian sides of that era. When Felipe was was playing and Pichot at scrum half, Gus Pichot, really great players they had through that era. But their lows are worse. So they're beating South Africa by a point, then the next week they lose by 40. They beat New Zealand in Wellington and they go to Eden Park and lose by 40. They lose to Australia by a point, I beat them by 60. So they're going from super highs to super lows, to super highs to super lows. So that would be driving Felipe absolutely nuts because he's seeing what they're doing. The other thing I would say, and they did start this journey under Michael Cheika, but the Argentinians were renowned as incredible kickers of the ball, and they would kick you off the park. Then they'd have a great to the corners of the park. Then their forwards would literally kick you off the park. They had packs that were just phenomenal. Their scrummaging was just absolutely aggressive, and they scrummaged at a unique way of scrummaging. They used to call it the armadillo. So the props would pack behind the hooker. They'd always pick a giant hooker, and the second rows would bind onto the hooker, and all the pressure would come through the scrum on the hooker. It was just this unique way of playing. Now, as gorgeous as that was for their traditions, and that's when they were much more isolated, they're playing a really open brand of rugby under Felipe. Now, let's also give this Argentinian side credit. Let's remember, Argentina doesn't have one professional team below the national side. They don't have a Super Rugby. They don't have a top 14 or the URC. All their players play overseas. They play in the other competitions. So it would be exactly the same as if Ireland were playing international rugby and all you have was the AIL. So you can't help but really admire what this team does when they get together. Many years ago when Felipe was still playing, he asked me, or I rang him up or texted him or whatever it was, email, said, mate, would you like to catch up for a coffee? And he said, come down the night before the test. And I said, no, I couldn't do that. I feel like I'm intruding. No. He said, no, come down. So we went down to the wasn't the Berkeley Court, I think it was Jury's up the road. And it was like this incredible party. Now, no one was drinking or anything, but all the families were there, all their parents and the cousins and uncles, all in the foyer, all talking, hugging, they're all moving around. Because the only time they saw each other was when the internationals were on. And Felipe said, it's a celebration when we play. We celebrate being together in Jersey and all that. Now, I think he's bringing that back in to this particular group. I think he's bringing in this absolute privilege of wearing that beautiful blue and white jersey. And they're playing like it. They're playing magnificent rugby. But perhaps the next week they're not mentally at it. Now, and I think this comes into what Alan was saying about Ireland. We're just in this incredibly unique period in the history of the game where a team like Australia that's last week was ranked 10th in the world and playing rubbish rugby comes out and plays just astronomical rugby. Rugby I haven't seen Australia play probably since the 2015 World Cup, maybe even before that. Maybe you've got to go back to 2003 to the last time I saw Australia play with such incredible counter-attack. It was a joy to watch. And they beat England at Twickenham. And then you're seeing Argentina beat all three championship teams, rugby championship teams, in the one season for the first time ever. And now is what happened, what I'm getting at for last week with Ireland. If you are not psychologically and tactically at the peak of your game every week and you're playing one of the top 10 teams, you can lose. And Ireland proved that last week because what Al said is true. No one can criticise the physical commitment of that Irish side. You know what shows that is their defence, and their scramble defence, as Alan said, was just incredible. Jamison Gibson Park, some of his tackles in scramble defence were absolute try savers. How did he get there from the scrum? The tackle he did on Damien McKenzie, I was in the studio, I said, how did he get there? Where did he come from to get to that tackle? That shows you the commitment. But if you're just 5% down, you'll lose. And that is great for us as people that are watching the game. And that's why this Argentinian side and the Fijians and the Australians now are real contenders. And if Ireland aren't on their game 100%, and this Puma side turns up and they are on their game, this is capable of winning. Now, I think Ireland should win this game. But that's what I'm saying. The margins in these international games now are not like it was 4 or 5 years ago. the margins have significantly reduced, which is wonderful for our game, but it's tough on our players. It's really tough on our players.
Well, there were other matches at the weekend, and I'm sort of chucking a bit of a spanner in the works there with a couple of questions here. What did you think of the 20-minute red card rule? First up, the kicking, also the change there. Did you like how they came in or not with these new sort of laws?
I don't know. It's going to take time. I think the red card in the Scotland game, I think it's harsh. Okay. I think it's...
was one the Wales Fiji as well.
There's no croc roll. I think, the Wales Fiji one is from Randrandra, wasn't it? Yeah. I don't know. That one is more reckless than Scott Cummings one against South Africa. I think Scott Cummings one against South Africa is not a upgrade. It shouldn't be upgraded to a red. Yellow, yes, for a bit of a reckless clean out. They didn't do a croc roll. He slid off. Two of them go down at the lower limbs. We want to eliminate that. We don't want players getting those lower limb injuries. Randrandra's one was reckless, and I think, I think that's... Take out this scenario before that. It's a red card, isn't it? It's a red card all day, and it's pretty clear. I think Scott Cummins one, his game being over is a difficult one.
And the escorting of the kicking.
The thing with the kicking is it's early days, but
Richard
I have a small little worry. I have a small little worry now that we've reduced this now to a real one-on-one contest, and that we're going to encourage scrum halves in particular to kick more, to do more
centre
box
field
kicks.
Instead of running. Yeah.
It could happen, because then you're kind of going, well, our guy running for it, he's not being restricted by anyone. If anyone steps out of the way or doesn't clear a path, we're going to get a penalty, and then he's a better chance now of getting there, because the old escort, you had to run around players, and it was much harder to get there. Now, obviously, if you're the team that's making the kick and you end up winning it back or getting a penalty, it's a great rule, a great law change. We'll have to see, but in some ways, the obstruction of and this sounds like a contradiction. The obstruction stuff that was going on was too much. Everyone was sprinting back, blocking the channels. So we'll see on that one. I just hope it doesn't encourage more kicking, but I suspect it will. We'll
see how it plays out. Matt, results-wise, Warren Gatland, is that Wales now 10 test matches in a row? Yes, they won a game in the summer. Was it against the Reds? They beat them last play. But as far as international
Queensland
test,
Reds,
yeah. And then what about Steve Borthwick as well? England losing a good few in a row as well against Australia.
Sorry, Stu.
Just touching on that.
That was a Reds development 15 as well, so that wasn't a full Queensland side. So, look at it. I feel a bit for Gaddy. A lot of people, just see the knives come out with Mike Phillip and everyone's sliding a knife in.
He did say something interesting enough, Matt, about the substitutions, wrong player going on and off. Like, why would you say that as a coach? Sorry, if it's happened, fair enough, but why? Like, surely that leaves the player in a bit of an awkward situation.
It does. I didn't think Gaddy handled that particular situation well, and that tells you he's under pressure. Of course he's under pressure. They got walloped by Australia in the summer and had a woeful Six Nations, and it's. And I don't think you can anyway claim that Queensland game as a win. Like that was a Queenslanders minus their Wallabies. It was development 15. They had some young guys coming in from the club system, like the equivalent of the AIL system. So, and don't want to criticise it, but I mean the reality is Wales are in a lot of trouble. There's another reality to that. Do not underestimate Fiji, who have now beaten Australia and Wales since the World Cup. So, that Fijian side, the Fijians could never cope with the tight five aspect of the game. You scrum, your line out, your maul, and the work. And they are now coping and playing really good footy with that. They're also playing tactically much better, and they've added their power game that they had through the seven. So that is also a good thing. Everyone says, we want to develop the other nations. But when the other nations develop and beat someone, we want to sack the coach. So, Wales picked a second 15 a few years ago against Georgia, and Georgia beat them, they sacked the coach. Every time, the Italy beat them, we want to sack the coach. Italy have come forward. Let's all, let's bring these teams through. Let's hope they get better. We want competition. Let's nice them. It's the way of the game, but to me, it's pretty dumb stuff. Because like that Welsh rugby at the moment is a bit like Australian rugby is. That they're in a lot of trouble off the field. Their organisations in trouble, financially in trouble, their clubs are in trouble, their systems in trouble. Now, for the first time in a long time, we saw a little glimmer of hope from the Wallabies, and I mean the first time in a decade.
And what a debut from Charlie, Matt. First professional rugby game. You did, yeah, you did. But not like Nick Frost. You haven't taken any credit yet.
Oh, mate. Frost, I'll take credit for everyone, mate. Everyone.
That came from Quinny. Quinny kicked me and said, "You say that."
Frosty, mate. Frosty sent me a photo of him holding the trophy. I'll take anything I can get at this stage of my life, mate. I'll take everything I can get. So I first saw Suwali many years ago playing for his school, Kings. So a lot of the reports are that he's rugby league and he's come to rugby union. That's only partially right. He played rugby like a lot of us in Australia. He played rugby league and rugby union during your development years, and that's what he did. He got a scholarship to the King's School, which is one of the better rugby schools in Australia, and he played out half. I saw him play when he was 15, playing for the King's School. He was the biggest kid on the field playing at 10, bigger than all the second rowers, and he was the best player on the field. So he had another couple of years in that under-18 competition. He played Australian under-18s against New Zealand, and they beat New Zealand that year straight to rugby league. And he's played first-grade rugby league since that time for the Roosters, now the Sydney City Roosters. Now, he came back. Here's the other one. Now, I knew he was going to be good. I didn't know how good. That is his first game out of school of rugby union. He hasn't played any club whatsoever. He's never played a game of rugby union since he left school. And his first game is a test match at Twickenham at outside centre. He hasn't played outside centre. He was a 10 at school. And look what he did. This kid is a superstar. Now, he is also a goal kicker. And, he is going to kick goals. He's going to run through.
He's going to be the saviour then, man. He's going to be the saviour. He's going to be the saviour. He's a complete freak. He was unbelievable at the weekend.
That's his first game.
No one hardly touched him. He just flicked it on.
4 years. Like that's staggering what he did in front of 80,000 people at Twickenham. Now, here's the other beautiful thing, because rugby league in Australia is just dominant at the moment. 17 professional teams. Rugby's going backwards. Our Waratahs are last. And, of course, the rugby league people have been slagging him, saying, what are you going to them for? You're going to be a loser. And, of course, he was. And rugby cannot get any media coverage in Australia. But the day before the test, I could not find any media on the test. There was not on the radio. I was looking for it. I actually said this to Rob Carney before the show. We're just not getting anything. Afterwards, everywhere. Back page, everything. And listen, the game needs just to survive. I'm not talking about dominating. Just to survive. That win by the Wallabies at Twickenham was probably the most significant win for Australian rugby since the 1999 World Cup. Now, I'm not exaggerating that. I was talking to a few guys saying, tell me another game. Tell me another win. Okay, they beat New Zealand to win a Bledisloe, or just to beat New Zealand up in Hong Kong. They haven't won the Bledisloe in 20 years.
James O'Connor kick, yeah.
Yeah, James O'Connor kick. That game could be one of the biggest since then, because it's just blown life back into it in this series. They're going to go with confidence. They can win in Cardiff. They can win in Cardiff. They've beaten Wales twice this year. They're a better side. They've got a better team than they did when they played in Australia. So that could be really huge for Australian rugby. Now, should they beat Ireland and Scotland? No, they shouldn't. But, gee, they shouldn't have won at Twickenham either. There's no way that I thought that team would get within 10 points. The first 15 minutes, I thought, oh, here we go. We're going to get smacked. And they showed something else, mate. They showed some courage. They showed some absolute balls. Like Quinny said, they put their bodies on the line. And that's why I was so disappointed for them when they conceded that try at about the 78-minute mark. I went, oh, not again. Not again. And to see them come out and do it, it was just wonderful. And every guy my age was texting each other. We were all jumping around the room, yelling at TVs, howling and screaming, carrying on like pork chops, because it's not just the win. It's trying to save the game, because it was dying there. And here's the other one, because we'll throw a bit of tennis in there. that really breathed life into the Lions series as well. Because the English ex-players, I thought, were disgracefully disrespectful, and what they said was awful about Australian rugby, and they're going to give those English boys two fingers, and that's going to breathe a bit of competition and a bit of life back into that Lions series that really was looking like it'd be a whitewash. Still think the Lions will win right now, but if Australia can get a couple more wins over here this November, that's going to make that series really different, because Australia don't play till that Lions series now. So it's a massive win, and this is another massive game for that, but not only Australia but for the Lions series at Cardiff on Sunday.
Tremendous last gasp score for Australia to win, and that's exactly right. That's what they need, and also for the Lions series. Back to home, back to Dublin on Friday night. Actually, Cian Healy, record, he gets on, 132 caps will join Brian O'Driscoll. Some achievement. Can hardly put words on how good that is.
It is, yeah, given the amount of injuries he's had as well. It's a phenomenal achievement. He's been around a long time. I remember when he came into an Irish squad first, maybe 2007, he was training with us in the build-up all that summer to the World Cup and didn't get selected. But I remember looking at him going, this guy is freakishly powerful and strong. And
he's come back so many times.
Yeah, he's had some very...
Every time you think that's him
finished, neck injury, and a bad ankle injury.
Yeah.
He had a problem with his
Three
hand.
or four, you could have at least said, outside of all the others.
Yeah, there were serious ones as well. So, incredibly robust. Always got on with his job. Incredibly well respected. And... I have said this, 2013, he got picked in the Lions to go to Australia. He picked up a bad injury, an ankle injury in Japan, playing for the Lions. He was the best loosehead in the world around that time. His work rate, his ball carrying, he was just such a destructive force around the field. So it's a wonderful achievement, and I'm sure he will get on. I think he'll want to be coming on the field that Ireland are not behind. But you know, and it shows the reliability of and the reliance on someone like Cian Healy, that we're not producing these props. You know, it's an issue really, isn't it? Particularly at loosehead. There are some good players there, but just that consistent high level of what Porter is, the level he's at. So it'll be a wonderful achievement for him, but he'll want to go out and be coming on the field and be standing there at the end when Ireland win the game.
He certainly will. And on that note, who's first this week for predictions? Matt, Alan was up and running first last week, so I've given you 30 seconds there to catch your breath and give us an outcome from Friday night, for Friday night.
I have to say, Quinny, you're a bad influence on me. I really wanted to say New Zealand. You're a bad influence.
He's never been influenced by anyone. Come on.
Mate, look, you've got to say Ireland.
Okay.
Argentina have never won in Ireland, and they've won. Ireland have won 9 of their last 10 encounters. But, and it's a big but, this is a much better Argentinian side, and I'm assuming that Ireland can't be as ill-disciplined and play as tactically poorly as they did last week. And you know, we've got to take Mac Hansen at his word. But if Ireland are not psychologically and tactically astute, this Argentinian side is capable of a major upset. And this is not like the Argentinian sides of 3 or 4 years ago. This is a much different beast. So I think Ireland will win, and I am literally praying Australia will win in Cardiff as well. I think that's going to be a huge one. If we can get an Ireland, my horrible game is going to be Ireland versus Australia. But if I can get Ireland and Australia up this weekend, I'll be very happy.
Alan, do you follow suit?
Ireland, Australia, France. Scotland are playing.
Yes.
Against... Jesus.
Fiji, aren't they?
No.
No, they beat Fiji. We'll give all the predictions. Matt is getting worried about Ireland, Australia yet. That's a couple of weeks out, Matt.
I want to draw.
Scotland, Portugal. They're Portugal, Quinny, so they'll win that.
Yeah, we don't need to give a prediction there.
Okay.
I think that the game of the weekend is France, New Zealand, Saturday night.
And you think France will get done?
It's a hard one to call, but if you ask me to pick, I'll say France because of the home advantage. But this New Zealand team have got a bit of momentum, haven't they?
Especially winning the close ones now.
They have a bit of a look about them. So, I think Ireland will win. We could have egg in our face here, and we could be talking about if Ireland don't win this game. I think we're going to feel a bit of. That there's a little bit of a turning of the tide, but I think they'll bounce back. I think the changes are good. England South Africa is a cracker as well on Saturday. You know what I mean? That's a cracker of a game. They're two incredibly physical, powerful games. We're going to see a fair bit of pressure on both sides there, but South Africa scrum, can England cope with that? So we'll go Ireland, South Africa, France and Australia.
Okay, you doubled the amount of predictions as Matt did,
Right,
but that's
okay.
fine. And I suppose it'd be no fair. It wouldn't be fair if I didn't go against Ireland, Matt. Just to make it a bit of fun. Will I go for the RGs again, or would it be rude not to?
It's up to you, Stuart. You've got the form. The picking, mate. You've got the form to pick it out.
Not to leave
a zero. You're one.
Not to leave the Italians out. I think they'll beat Georgia.
Okay, I'll give you a chance to catch up then. I'll go with the RGs. All right, Matt and Al. It's been absolutely.
Just for the record, I'm in with France. I'm with France and South Africa as well for Al. But we're just doing Australia and.
We'll need to get a chart up. There's so many fixtures. Matt and Al, thanks as always, and don't forget to tune in Friday night for Test 2. It's Ireland against Argentina, 7:30 on Virgin Media 1.